One of the questions I see fairly often is the question regarding why men who reap very little reward on the internet engage in this very new phenomenon of gifting women massive amounts of money. Now, gifting women massive amounts of money, that could be relative, or it's relative to the context, obviously, but that act in and of itself is nothing new, obviously. But when I say a recent phenomenon, of course, I am saying something, well, I'm talking about something that's quite recent. The idea of Twitch streaming, for example, or even YouTube channels. 30 years ago, for example, just as an example, 30 years ago, imagine you're out on a date as a man, and you have to go through several successions of dates before you actually get a blowjob and fuck the woman. Let's say you end up spending $500 or $600 in the process. Okay, you're showing your utility, and I'll get into that in a bit, and there's a reward at the end as well. But what you see these days is quite strange by the lights of many, because you'll see people on a Twitch stream, male oglers, if you will, throwing hundreds of dollars at a female merely for playing a game, looking at the camera, and maybe for 5 minutes naming yourself his online girlfriend, or something to that effect. There's another question, of course, that arises from all of this, and that is, why bother? I mean, there's online porn that's free, and it's much better than just watching a girl in a tight top play a game, in theory. And here's where it gets tricky. As much as people, or men specifically, but women too, but as much as men like porn circumvents a very important element to the male psyche, and that is the need to feel useful, to be a utility to a female. It's part of a psychological process that resides in men and their desire to feel useful to women. Now, if you're in a situation where you're young or youngish and don't have a lot of female contact, so you're an incel, and you drop $300, $400, $500 on a Twitch streamer who then acknowledges you and tells you how appreciative she is, in a way you're being useful to her. You're getting almost nothing in return, but in many cases, that is more valuable to men than merely checking out some pornography. Because, as I said, pornography is a direct route. There's no process, there's no conquest, there's no hunt, and most importantly, there is no sense of utility. You're just going straight to the final act, you get it done, and you move on. But giving women money, well, makes you feel useful. And it's not just Twitch. I mean, Romy Millennial, I've talked about her before, is not a particularly interesting channel, and the stuff she puts out is just repetitious and repeats itself, not just in the sense that the themes and topics are the same, but they're topics that have been talked about to death already, years ago. But she has $4.6 thousand worth of support on Patreon. I'm willing to bet the house that I do not own that the vast majority of those supporters are males. Let's be honest, is she really producing groundbreaking, interesting, remarkable content? Is even the production value so high that it warrants that type of support? No, probably not. But it allows men to feel useful. And I think that sense of utility, the need to feel that sense, is so great in some not so insignificant subpopulation of men that, yes, they will throw money at internet specters in the hopes of some kind of acknowledgement, and something they can't get from, say, porn. Not at all. And so this allows them to feel that sense of utility. And utility is the basis of, the major basis, not the only basis, but it's the major basis of the relationship of the human male to the human female. If you're useful to a female in whatever regard, and I think people often, and I've said this in the past, but often conflate utility with merely being a bill payer. Being a bill payer is probably the most common manifestation of being useful to women, but doing favors for her. Even if you're a good fuckboy, that's a form of utility to her. You're giving her pleasure. And very rarely is any one man the entire package. But of course, financial services, chauffeuring her about, lifting heavy things, there's something about the male psyche that just laps that up. And for obvious reasons. A man who's not useful is a man who does not exist. The entirety of male identity is predicated on being useful. I mean, it goes without saying to quote once again for the 15,000th time the late man-woman myth. Women are human beings and men are human doings. And this is just an extension of that. I call it synthetic, hence the title, because whereas 30 years ago a man might have reaped rewards, compliments, and she might have looked him in the eye and told him how great he is and how much she needs him, and might have even sucked his dick. These days, it's just an emoticon, right? It's just for these young guys who are throwing money, these thirsty men throwing money at these women, or some brief chat message saying how much she appreciates it, all with little to no obligation on her part. And of course, that's part of the sexual dynamic, because the more a woman can get away with, that is, the fewer goods she needs to give up, particularly in terms of sexual access, the better off she is. Because she can just find a more suitable mate or somebody who's willing to do the same thing. So that is pretty much how and why that is occurring. It's just an extension of the male desire to feel useful in a very strange new context that has not existed for the entirety of humanity. A screen where you get some kind of acknowledgement, it feels good in some minor manner. And all the porn in the world cannot substitute for that. I've seen this time and again, but it's obvious, because male identity is predicated on being useful. Useful to the world, useful to women, useful to other men. You cannot simply exist and be a man. Well, you can, but nobody's going to notice you. And if you disappear, nobody will notice you disappearing either. That's just the nature of male identity. End of story. This is merely an extension of that. Now, there are better ways of going about this. And, I've seen people pose the idea or the question, well, why do this? Why not go to a strip club and drop $500? At least the feigned interest will be direct. At least her twat will be flung in your face, or her rack, or whatever. Well, that's actually not a bad idea. But I think a lot of these guys who are just throwing money at these women are probably way too young, inexperienced, feel a sense of shame, wouldn't trust themselves to go to a strip club, never mind attend a whorehouse or see a prostitute. So this is sort of the safest bet for them, right? This is the safest way of going about it, the way of making some girl feel good about herself and making himself feel good about himself by just dropping money. Because the other avenues are just too risky. They're too shameful. If you're some 18-year-old guy who works a part-time job, has some money saved up, maybe you want to drop her $200 or $300. It would go a much longer way, obviously, at a strip club, but that's too embarrassing, maybe. Although the simulation would be more authentic, at least it would appear to be. Because as long as you're dropping her money, she's going to appear interested. But that's what I mean by synthetic. It really is synthetic because the returns you get are just not the same kind of recompense that you might have gotten in a previous age for paying attention to her. But that's the name of the game. That is how our society works. That is how the species works. And sure, would I advise young men not to drop hundreds of dollars on female streamers and to support other channels apart from Romy Millennial Well, yeah, I would, but nobody's going to listen to me, or anyone else for that matter. People are going to just follow their instincts. So anyway, I thought I might clarify that. As a final note, I will just summarize my analysis here of what's going on. The desire to feel useful, male utility, and the safest route to that without risking embarrassment, either through direct interaction with women and the more conventional way means of prostitution, that is normal dating, or formal prostitution, or kind of middle road between conventional prostitution, dating, and formal prostitution in the form of, they say, a strip club. You can just circumvent all the risk and danger and still feel somewhat good about yourself because you dropped her a couple $100 and she said that you are her online boyfriend for 5 minutes. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.